Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about the king's safety, how to evaluate the king's safety, and also a very concrete and practical example of a game that I played. As always, you know the drill. It's chapter number 20 of the course to reach 2000 ELO, and we will see a game that I played against a 2500 named Leo271207. So I played e4, my opponent went c5, and since it's an online chess game, I played d4, the Smith-Morra gambit. Captures c3, and now usually people capture, but okay, it doesn't matter, you can capture the pawn. If you ever ask yourself whether or not you should be capturing, capture it. When I played the Sicilian in Classical, I have to admit it now, I played the Caro-Kann line with the Sicilian over the board now, I take the pawn, because it's playable. But it doesn't mean that in Classical I do not play the Smith-Morra myself, because I do, and I have great results. I mean, the last time I lost a game once against Johan Balzer, French 2250-ish rated player, even though I was completely winning the Smith-Morra gambit. It's just a mistake from me. So this is the only loss that I can really recall. No, over the board, I think I lost only this one game in the Smith-Morra. Yeah, I lost a lot of games against the Alapin though, because I'm not a good player, but either way. No, not f3. So this is the Alapin, and this is the line that I'm recommending you. Knight f3, just bait the capture, you just win the knight, obviously. Here black went knight c6. Black has a lot of things to do, but basically black wants to play d6. Usually we have to trade, then we get the isolated pawn, but a line that I could be recommending you if you're not sure. So black usually can capture back with the queen or with the pawn. Doesn't really matter. Our next answer will be the same. We will go, knight d4, followed by g3, bishop g2 castles, and then we have a very flexible position. This is a line that I can recommend you. This is a line that I've played a couple of times. Yeah, so this is something that I'm recommending you. Anyway, he went knight c6, I went bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3, and I'm still sacrificing a pawn. If he captures, I'm better developed. There could be a lot of holes on the dark squares, so, very often I end up transferring my pieces. Everything can happen. Again, I would be recommending you to test this line out. But in this position, he went d6, so I captured on d6, he captured back, and I castled. Because yet again, if he captures on c3, I'm playing queen e2 in this position, with the intention that if c takes b2, I capture back with the bishop, and I have a lot of compensations. But this is already a known thing. This is just a very known normal line. I think bishop g4 is playable, queen g6 is playable. But okay. Although after bishop g4, then might be bishop f7 now that I'm thinking about it. Like captures, check, this. But I'm not sure, but I think this is fine. But okay. Okay. I mean, I'm up a pawn, but he can't castle, so I have some compensations for the king's safety. Okay. Now, g6 was played. I captured back with the pawn, which is a little bit off. Here there is knight g5, which already gets an advantage because I'm fighting the pawn. Notice the king is still in the center. So since the king is in the center and I have some pieces attacking some squares around the king, I can already tell myself that the king isn't weak. For example, take a look at the king. A lot of the squares on the king can go on are already being controlled. So the bishop directly keeps an eye on the f7 square. The knight indirectly controls a little bit the f7 square. The king is still in the center. The e file is half open, so indirectly the king is a little bit effy, but I do not have any concrete ways of really making, something out of it. And therefore it's a little bit off. Now, I went c takes e4, which is alright, but after bishop g7, I had to play knight g5. I went to d5, which is just pushing the isolated pawn. I was talking about the isolated pawn last time. Once again, it's a really opening-based type of thing, so I would really be recommending you to learn the Panov as white if you want to become good with the isolated pawn, because in the Panov you get the isolated pawn structure. A very short thing for the note. This is the Panov. I'm playing a lot of isolated pawn structures for both sides. So that's my thing. I'm only titled because I became good with the isolated pawns. Anyway, here when you have an isolated pawn, you really want to be able to push it because, especially in that case, if there is a pawn on e7 or on c7, since you're getting the two open files, you could be using those two pawns as targets. For example, this pawn is now a backwards e pawn, the same way we saw it a couple of chapters before. And it could be the same thing for the c pawn. So now my goal would be to double on the e file, for example. But okay, he went knight a5, I went knight c3, and here he could have traded everything and castle with the intention that he can't capture. Now the thing is I'm attacking the rook, so he can't win the pawn because I'm winning the rook. So he will have to go f6, but then I go rook d1, knight d5, queen b3, bishop e6. And this is a hard position because I go knight e4, I'm attacking on e6, I might be doing that. So notice that I just sacrificed my isolated pawn, but therefore I got a lot of counteractions, a lot of tactics. It's not forced that if you sacrifice your isolated d pawn that you will get counteractions, but it's very likely. So take that in consideration. By the way, this looks scary, but there is not a single good discovery with the knight, and therefore it's alright. If he tries to attack my rook with the knight, I can always capture it. If he goes knight b4, then I win. So he has to go for something like knight f4 now, but then at the very least I trade. This is being attacked, so he has to capture. Then I go, okay, I have check, which wins the knight at this point. Okay, I win the knight. I didn't see that, but now I see that, so it's alright. Anyway, he castled. I played rook e1 because, again, this is the same thing. He can try to sacrifice. He can try to win the pawn that way. I think I would even capture back with the pawn, but I'm not sure now. With the intention that I could play c4, bishop b2, queen c3, and the way I would... Okay, he captures the pawn and go for something like this. I go bishop b2. This is still a hard game, don't get me wrong. But for blitz, it's interesting. And the way I would evaluate that is, when it comes to the squares around the king, I have two pieces that can play on the dark squares against one, and this piece is very far away from achieving anything on the dark squares. Although now that I'm looking at it, maybe there is this, and if I go queen h6, trying to go knight g5, there could be knight f6. But still, this is still a sharp position. Maybe I'm blind. It's 18 o'clock. I didn't sleep well, so maybe I'm blind today. But in the worst case scenario, he just captures everything, captures that way, or captures that way. I go queen c2, and this is the same thing. I still have the squares around the king, so I could be trying to look for forcing moves and ways to play. I'm just interested to see what the engine says here. Yeah, queen c4. Yeah, this is what I thought, more or less equal. Okay, it's just that the engine plays it that way, trades and captures on e7. And okay, this could be... I mean, to be fair, I see how the engine evaluates that. It basically thinks that the rook is active, so the bishop has a hard time leaving. The knight is a little bit, tasteless. I could play bishop h6 followed by knight g5, maybe attacking the pawn. So I could see how I'm getting a lot of compensations here. And to be fair, I would just keep that noted. We never know. Maybe that could be useful in my repertoire, for my blitz repertoire, obviously. Anyway, he went bishop g4. I went bishop g5, just applying more pressure against the backwards e-pawn. He played rook to e8. I played h3, and I'm fine if he trades everything. Trades. Because after all those trades right there, now in that case, I was a little bit aware of the endgame, but I still thought that I could play, for example, queen g3, which the engine says is a tiny bit better for black. So in blitz it doesn't mean a lot. Again, what the engine thinks is that I have the right bishop, so I could be trying to create some threats or whatever. But okay, it's not the point. The point is, again, how to evaluate the king's safety. So let me just arrive at the point. So I went queen e2 because the pawn is a backwards pawn. By the way, I just want to check if I've missed anything. No, I think captures. Now I can even capture back. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I can even just capture play c4 because now I'm winning the pawn. Okay, this would be a lot easier actually. Because again, now this pawn is also weak. If he tries to win a tempo, I can't capture because I lose, but I can play bishop f6, and this is still a problem. So yeah, the king is still stuck, but now it's a problem because the king will be stuck in the endgame. So you can still evaluate this king as a problem. And also, if I play rook on the d file, for example, the rook will have a hard time leaving again the 8th rank because the king is very unsafe. Just a couple of elements here and there. But he played bishop d7, I went queen e2, applying some pressure. He went e6, and as you might all know and remember from the other chapter, usually e6 is a problem because I capture, and once he captures back, with the pawn, for example, the pawn becomes weak. But in that case, he can capture either way. He captured with the bishop, after which I went knight e4, and notice that I'm going to play knight f6. Now, this whole game is based on the dark squares, because a lot of sidelines and tactics were working, around the dark squares again. That's the only reason. Now, if I realize while calculating some sidelines that there could be some tactical problems on the dark squares, I'm already aware of something. I have to take that into consideration. It's not cheating to reuse something that I've realized during the game. Don't get me wrong. It's not because you just realize that, okay, if the bishop disappears, I could be playing knight f6 fork, that you have to forget about it. And this is why we also try to calculate every single time when we're playing a chess game, even though we might know a certain line in a certain position, a certain opening, whatever, we always try to reuse what we calculated because we never know. We simply never know. So he went queen b4. I was already aware of some problems on the dark square, so I thought, okay, let's just play knight f6. I'm a little bit baiting him into capturing, but once he captures back, my bishop is basically keeping the king completely stuck, and the way I would evaluate that is I'm just much better, because I'm going to play queen e3, then this, maybe knight g5, and it would be fine. Here, the best option that he had was probably to go knight d5, after which I just thought I could play bishop d4. And even though I'm sacrificing a pawn, like, come on, this is, obviously I'm fine here. Threatening mate, he has to go f6, and maybe queen d6, threatening stuff. I'm still threatening something here. Queen e3 is hard to play because of the knight, and queen e2 is a little bit slow because I would need like 1-2 moves. Queen e5 is already threatening something. Queen d6 again threatens stuff. If he does this, then maybe I can already win this pawn at some point, like trade and win. So it's a much more concrete line. But he went bishop h3, thinking that if I capture back, I lose my queen. He just missed, and I can just take on e8, and he resigned. So I'm very sorry that they blunder. I can't control my opponent's madness. But what has to be realized is that the king's being stuck. Just a side effect. Yeah. And at the very end, captures. I win the bishop, and I win, and I'm up a piece and a rook. Now, how to evaluate the king's safety yet again? So to evaluate the king's safety, you take a look at the squares around the king, and if you realize that some of your pieces, for example in that case, some of the white pieces are controlling 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter, some squares around the king, directly or indirectly, so that way with the bishop, or a couple of moves prior when the e-file was open and the rook was eventually standing on the e-file, if you realize something like this, you could already tell that, okay, the king is a little bit unsafe. Because you already have one piece controlling one of the squares around the king, the other piece was also controlling some of them. And this is how you evaluate that. And then if you see that there are, on the top of that, forcing candidate moves, forcing moves, weak signals, then the king is in real danger. But the fact that some of your pieces are already taking a look at some squares around the king, this is already a problem. So we saw that. I'm pretty happy with what we just talked about today. If you have any questions, just let me know. See you in the next chapter that is all about domination. See you in the next chapter. Take care.